Hey there, story lovers. This is Veil Soul, and we're bringing you an epic adventure. What if Anko was ordered to hunt Naruto, but he cured her curse mark and made her his most loyal shinobi? Hit like, subscribe, and let's begin this journey. Chapter 1. The Sandame's office smelled like old paper and older smoke, and Anko Mitarashi knew before she crossed the threshold that whatever waited for her on the other side of that door was going to ruin her night. She could feel it in the way the ANBU at the door wouldn't meet her eyes. She could feel it in the pressure that hung in the air, the kind that settled in a room when men had been arguing for hours and had only stopped because someone with rank had pulled the cord. She rolled her shoulders, cracked her neck, and walked in like she didn't care, because caring had never gotten her anything good in this village. "Hokage-sama," she said, dropping to one knee with a sloppiness that was almost a joke. "You rang." Hiruzen Sarutobi was standing at the window, his back to her, the long stem of his pipe glowing dully against the late afternoon haze. He didn't turn around. That was the first thing that bothered her. The old man always turned around. Anko, his voice had iron in it that she hadn't heard since the war stories. "Stand," she stood. "What I am about to tell you does not leave this room. Not to your friends, not to Ibiki, not to your team. Are we clear? Crystal." He turned then, and gods, he looked older than he had a week ago. There were hollows under his eyes she didn't remember. The pipe in his hand had gone out, and he hadn't noticed. "We have received intelligence," he said, "that Orochimaru intends to move on Konoha during the Chunin exams. This part you may have guessed." She hadn't, actually, but she nodded like she had, because that was the game. "What you could not have guessed," the Sandame continued, "is the nature of his vector. He has placed an asset inside the village, someone who has been compromised since childhood, someone whose chakra signature can be traced, manipulated, used as a beacon to bring his forces past our wards." The skin on the back of her neck prickled. Her hand, without her permission, drifted toward the high collar of her coat. She forced it back down. "Who?" He looked at her for a long moment. She had the sudden, absurd feeling that he was about to apologize. "Naruto Uzumaki." The name landed in the room and sat there. Anko blinked. "The loud one, the orange one," she laughed, once short and ugly. "Hokage-sama, with respect, I've watched that kid trip over his own sandals trying to paint the Hokage monument. He's a genin, a bad one. He couldn't compromise a tea shop, much less a village." "That," Hiruzen said quietly, "is what he wants us to think. You're serious." "I have evidence, Anko, reliable evidence, suppressed bloodline activity, chakra fluctuations in his apartment that match Orochimaru's seal craft, movements at odd hours, skills that exceed what he displays in the field by an order of magnitude." He set the pipe down on his desk with a small, precise click. "I would not have called you here on suspicion. I called you here because the matter is decided." "Decided how?" "Eliminate him tonight, before the exams begin, quietly if you can, without leaving a body to find, if you can manage that as well." Something cold slid down Anko's spine. She had killed before. She had killed a great many people, in fact, in a great many bad ways, and she had not particularly enjoyed any of it, but she had not particularly minded either. That was what Shinobi did. That was what she did, especially because the village handed her the jobs no one else wanted, the ones with snakes in them, the ones that came back smelling like her old master. But this was a kid. And not just any kid, that kid. The one with the look she recognized when she walked past him in the market, the one she had pretended not to notice, because if she stopped and said "I know," it would have been an admission she could not afford to make in public. "Why me?" she said. It wasn't a question. It came out flat. The Sandame's eyes met hers, and there was something in them that almost looked like shame. "Because if you fail, no one will believe you were sent. Because if you succeed, no one will be surprised that the snake girl did it. Because," his voice caught just for an instant and then steadied, "because if there is anyone in this village who understands what it means to be compromised by Orochimaru, it is you." She felt her own mouth twist before she heard the words come out of it. "Right, send the broken one to break the other broken one. Tidy." "Anko, mission accepted, Hokage-sama," she bowed because protocol, and because if she didn't bow she was going to scream. "Will that be all?" He looked at her for a long, long moment, then he nodded. She was halfway out the door when his voice caught her. "Anko," softer now, tired, "I am sorry." She did not turn around. "Save it, old man." She did not go straight to find the boy. She went to the dango stand first, because if she was going to do this thing, she was going to do it on a full stomach, and because if she did not put something sweet in her mouth, she was going to bite through her own cheek. Kyuchai nodded at her from across the way at Ikaraku, and she pretended not to see him, because the old ramen cook had been feeding Naruto Uzumaki for 10 years, and she did not want to know that, not tonight. She ate 3 skewers without tasting them. The 4th she held between her teeth and stared at the sky as the sun went down behind the Hokage monument, painting the faces of the dead in long red light. The 4th's face caught the last of it and held it the longest. She had not known him well, she had only met him twice. But she remembered his eyes had been very, very blue and very, very kind, and she remembered now with a cold little jolt that his student had eyes the same color. She paid, she left, she climbed. She was on the roof of his apartment building before the street lamps came on, crouched in the shadow of the water tower, watching his window through the slats. She had been here before, twice, on nights when she couldn't sleep, and her feet had carried her places she did not approve of. She had never gone closer than this. She had told herself it was none of her business. She watched him eat dinner, instant ramen, of course. He ate it standing at the counter, looking out the window at nothing, and she could see from the roof that he was not the boy he was on the street. The grin was gone. The bounce was gone. He looked in that small lit kitchen like a young man who was very tired and very alone, and who had been very tired and very alone for a long time. He looked up. He looked right at her. He couldn't see her. She was certain of that. She had her chakra suppressed down to a whisper, and she was behind the slats of a water tower in a shadow at dusk. There was no possible way. He smiled. He raised one hand in a small, casual wave, the way you wave at someone you've been expecting. Then he turned around, picked up a scroll from his counter, and walked out of his apartment. Anko sat back on her heels and said a word her mother would have slapped her for. He had made her. He had made her days ago, maybe weeks ago, and he had not said anything to anyone, and now he was walking out of his apartment with a scroll, and he was heading, she could see from the angle of his path, toward the forest of death. He was inviting her. The little boy in orange was inviting the special Jonin assassin into the deadliest training ground in the village. She started laughing. She couldn't help it. She laughed until her ribs hurt, crouched on a rooftop in the dying light, because the universe had a sense of humor, and tonight it was at her expense. Then she stood up, drew the kunai from her thigh holster, and went after him. The forest of death at night was a thing Anko knew the way other women knew their own apartments. She knew which roots tripped you and which only looked like they would. She knew which trees had things living in them that would eat a chunin in 3 bites and which were merely poisonous. She knew the shortcuts and the dead ends and the places where the canopy got so thick that even moonlight gave up. He led her on a merry little chase through about 1/3 of it. He wasn't fast, not Jonin fast anyway, not at first, but he was clever, and the cleverness was the part that was wrong. He doubled back. He used a false trail with a clone. He went up when she expected him to go down and across when she expected him to break for cover. None of these were things a dead last genin should know how to do. She let him think she was buying it for about 10 minutes. Then she came down out of the canopy in front of him hard enough to crack the earth, and the trees around them were full of snakes before her feet touched the ground. "Hi, kid!" He stopped. He did not stumble back. He did not gasp. He set the scroll down very carefully at his feet, dusted his hands on his pants, and looked up at her with those very blue eyes. "Hi, Anko-san, you've been making me," she said. "For a while, yeah, and you didn't say anything. I figured you'd say something when you wanted to." She laughed again, that same ugly bark. The snakes around her clearing hissed in answer. "Yeah, well, tonight's the night. Naruto-kun got some bad news for you. Hokage Jiji sent you to kill me." It was not a question. It was a flat little statement of fact, delivered in the same tone he might have used to comment on the weather, and it stopped her cold. "How?" He tilted his head. There was no fear in him. There was something else, something she could not put a name to, something that looked almost like patience. "Because I'd send me to kill me too," he said. "If I were him and I'd been told what he was told. Danzo's been feeding him bad intel for weeks. I let him." "You," she blinked. "You let him. I needed to know who he'd send." Naruto's eyes flicked very briefly to the curse mark hidden beneath her collar and then back to her face. "I was hoping it would be you." The snakes went still. The whole forest went still. Anko Mitarashi, Special Jonin, Scourge of Tea and Eyes Interrogation Block, the snake's apprentice, stood in a clearing in the forest of death and felt, for the first time in years, well and truly off balance. "Explain that sentence," she said quietly, "before I put a kunai through your throat. You won't. Try me." "Anko-san," he spread his hands. There was nothing in them. "If I wanted you dead, you would have died in that water tower on the roof. I had the seal tag stuck to the underside of the slat you were leaning against. It's still there. I haven't activated it." She did not breathe for a count of 3. "You're lying." "I'm really not." She reached up very slowly and touched the back of her shoulder. There was nothing on her coat. Of course there was nothing on her coat. He was a kid. He was a genin. He held up his right hand and made a small, sharp seal, and somewhere very far away on the roof of an apartment building in Konoha, she actually heard through the night air, a sharp electric crack like a paper tag discharging. "That was a tracker," he said. "Not a bomb. I wouldn't bomb my own apartment." "But it could have been." Anko's mouth had gone very dry. "Who are you?" she said. He smiled. It was not the grin. It was something else, something quieter and older, and it sat on his face like it had always belonged there and he had just been hiding it. "I'm Naruto Uzumaki," he said, "and I'd like to make you an offer." He sat down on a fallen log. After a long moment, against every instinct her training had ever given her, Anko sat down on the other end of it. The snakes around the clearing dispersed back into the trees, one by one, like an audience that had decided the show was about to get interesting and wanted a better view. "Talk," she said. "3 things first." He counted on his fingers. 1. I am not Orochimaru's asset. I have never met him. I would not piss on him if he were on fire, although I suppose technically you'd want to fire being Naruto. Right, sorry. 2. The Sandaime is not a bad man. He is a tired old man who is being lied to by Danzo Shimura, who has wanted me on a root leash since I was 4 years old and has finally decided he's running out of time. 3. He looked at her sidelong. I know what's under your collar. I know what it does. I know what it's been doing to you for 10 years, and I can take it off. She went very, very still. That's not funny. I'm not joking. That mark, she said, and her voice had gone low and dangerous, was put on me by Orochimaru himself, personally. The seal masters of this village have looked at it. Jiraiya of the Sannin has looked at it. They all said the same thing. It does not come off. The chakra is bonded to my coil system at a depth that cannot be reached without killing the host. So if you are sitting there, kid, telling me you can do what Jiraiya couldn't, I can. Then you are either lying or insane, or I'm Uzumaki. She stopped. He was looking at her very steadily. The moonlight was through the canopy now, falling on his face in pieces. And she could see, now that she was looking, really looking, that there was a faint glow at his temples, like chakra pooling just under the skin. Seal masters gathering. She had seen Jiraiya do it once on a bad night in a worse country, and she had never forgotten what it looked like. The Uzumaki, he said quietly, were the greatest sealing clan in the world. Whirlpool seal masters built the wards that still hold this village together. My mother was one, my grandmother before her. The Sandaime told me none of this. I found it on my own 3 years ago in a vault he doesn't know I have access to, and I have been very busy since. 3 years, she said. You're 12. I'm 13 next month, and I'm Uzumaki. We pick things up fast when we want to. She stared at him. Show me, she said. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a brush and a small flat inkstone and a roll of paper so thin it was almost translucent. He laid them out on the log between them, and the moonlight caught the brush, and she saw that the handle was old, carved with the spiral of the Uzumaki crest, and the bristles had been used so many times they had softened into a master's tool. Take off the coat, he said. Just the coat. I need to see the mark. If this is a trick, Anko-san. He looked up at her, and his eyes were so blue. I have been alone my whole life. I have spent 3 years preparing for the night someone in this village would finally come for me with a knife. I knew it would be one of 3 people, and I prayed it would be you, because the other 2 would have made me kill them, and I did not want to do that. Please, take off the coat. She did not know afterward why she did it. She had been holding that coat closed for 10 years. She had slept in it. She had bathed with it folded next to the tub. She had not let a man near the back of her neck since she was 12 years old, and a pale tongue had touched her skin and put a thing inside her that she could not get out. She took off the coat. She pulled the mesh down off her shoulder. She let the boy on the log see the mark. He drew in his breath, not in horror, in something closer to recognition, the way a doctor draws in his breath when the symptoms confirm what he already suspected. "That bastard," he said softly. "He used a recursive bind. He built it to feed. Every time you've been angry, every time you've been scared, every time you've used killing intent for 10 years, he's been drinking it from across the continent." "What? I'll explain later. Hold still." He dipped the brush. He began to write on her shoulder. The ink was cold, and then warm, and then cold again, and the strokes were impossibly precise, and she could feel them, she realized. She could feel each character as he laid it down, settling against the curse mark like a key sliding into a lock that had been waiting a long time for the right one. He worked in absolute silence. The forest around them had gone quiet again. Somewhere very far away an owl called once and was answered. He drew a spiral around the mark. Then a second, inside the first, rotating the other way. Then a third. Then he wrote 4 characters around them at the cardinal points, and she did not know the characters, but she knew with a certainty that came up from her bones that they were Uzumaki and they were old and they were hers now in a way she could not explain. "This is going to hurt," he said. "I've had worse." "No," he said, "you haven't, but you're going to be okay. Look at me." She looked at him. "What's your favorite food?" "What? Favorite food? Quick." "Dango." "Why, what color?" "Red bean." "Why, how many sticks at once is too many?" "There's no such thing as too many." He pressed his palm flat to her shoulder and said one word she did not catch, and the world went white. She did not scream. She found out later that she did not scream. She had thought she did, but her throat was untouched in the morning, and Naruto told her with great seriousness that she had bitten down on a piece of the log and broken one of her own back teeth instead, and he was sorry about the tooth. What she remembered was this. She remembered the mark on her shoulder moving. She remembered it crawling, the way a living thing crawls when something has finally come for it. And she remembered the spirals of ink on her skin tightening around it like a fist. She remembered a sound, very high and very far away, that she understood somehow was a voice. A man's voice, a familiar voice, screaming in fury from across mountains and rivers and a great deal of distance, screaming no and mine and mitrshi. And then she remembered Naruto's hand on her shoulder, warm and steady, and his other hand cupping the side of her face, and his blue eyes very close to hers in the dark of the forest, and his voice saying very calmly, "You are not his. You were never his. Come back to me, Anko." She came back. She was crying. She did not cry. She had not cried in 8 years, and she was crying now, hot and silent, and her shoulder was bare, and the mark she had to look, the mark was gone. Where it had been there was a pale spiral, faintly silver, like an old scar that had healed clean a long time ago. It did not hurt. It did not pull. The constant, low, decade-long whisper at the back of her skull that she had learned to ignore the way you learn to ignore a leaking faucet was gone. The forest was silent. The boy was kneeling in front of her on the log. "Anko-san!" She could not speak. She reached out, blind, and grabbed 2 fistfuls of his stupid orange jacket, and she pulled him forward until his forehead was against hers, and she breathed him in for a long, shaking moment in the dark. "You little monster," she whispered. "You absolute little monster, what are you?" "Free," he said quietly. "Same as you now," she laughed. It was wet, and it was ugly, and it was the first real laugh that had come out of her in 10 years, and when it died, she pulled back from him and wiped her face with the back of her wrist and looked at him very seriously. "That offer," she said. "You mentioned an offer." "I did. Make it." He sat back on his heels. He looked for a moment like a boy again, like a 13-year-old who had just done something very difficult and was just now realizing it. Then the older thing in his face settled back into place, and he met her eyes. "I'm going to remake this village, Anko-san, not tonight, not tomorrow, but soon and from the inside, and not by burning it down. The Sandaime is going to die in the next 3 months whether I help him or not. Orochimaru has plans, and Danzo has plans, and they are both going to fail because I am going to make them fail. But the old man is dying either way, and what comes after him is what I care about. I am not going to be hawkish. Not yet. I am too young and the village is not ready. But I am going to put the right person in that seat, and I am going to make sure they survive long enough to do the work. And what do you want from me?" "You," he said simply. "Not your sword, not your jutsu, not your information. You, beside me. because I have spent 13 years being alone in this village and I am done with it, and the first person I am choosing, the first person I have ever chosen is you. Because you understand what was done to me without me having to explain it. Because the village threw you away the same way it threw me away. Because when I imagine the next 10 years, I imagine you in them, and I don't imagine anyone else. The forest was very still. Anko Mitarashi sat on a fallen log in the forest of death with her coat off and her shoulder bare, and a pale silver spiral where 10 years of nightmare used to be. And she looked at the boy across from her. The boy who had walked her into the deadliest training ground in the village, because he trusted her not to kill him. The boy who had taken Orochimaru's mark off her skin like it was a sticker on a child's hand, and she felt something turn over in her chest that she had thought died a long time ago. "Kid," she said softly, "you don't know what you're asking for." "Yes, I do. I'm not a nice person." "I don't need a nice person, I need a loyal one. I'm older than you. By 6 years, I can wait," she almost choked. "Naruto." "Sorry," he grinned, and for the first time it looked like the grin from the street, the real one with the foxiness in it, and she realized with a slow horror that she liked it. I didn't mean that's a separate conversation, for later, if you want, I'm just saying." My offer," he said, sobering, "is this. Tonight you go back to the Hawkage, you tell him the mission is complete. You give him the scroll on the ground there, which contains the body of a dead missing nin I killed last week who happens to share my blood type and approximate build, sealed and prepared. He will accept it because he wants to accept it. From tonight on, the village thinks Naruto Uzumaki is dead. I become someone else for a little while. You become my handler of record, my partner in fact, and the only person in this village besides me who knows the truth. And in 3 months, when everything moves, we move together." She stared at him. "You planned all of this. I planned all of this. You planned me. I hoped for you." He looked down at his hands for a moment. "There's a difference. If you had said no, if you had tried to take my head, I would have left the village tonight alone, and I would have done all of this from outside. It would have been harder. It would have been bloodier. I would have done it anyway. But Anko-san," he looked up, "I really did not want to do it alone." She let out a long, slow breath. She looked at the silver spiral on her shoulder in the moonlight. She touched it very gently with 2 fingertips. It was warm. It was hers. "Yes," she said. He blinked. "Yes. Yes, you absolute lunatic. Yes, I'm yours. Whatever the hell that means." She pulled her coat back on, slowly, deliberately, and she did not close it all the way at the throat because she did not have to any more, and the cool forest air on her bare collarbone felt like the first breath she had taken in 10 years. "But we are going to have a long conversation about you saying things like I can wait to a woman 6 years older than you with a knife on her thigh. Are we clear, Uzumaki?" "Crystal," he said deadpan, and she snorted. "Good." She stood up. She tested her shoulder, a small roll, a small stretch, and felt nothing pull, nothing bite, nothing tug back toward a pale-faced man in a far country. She felt for the first time in her adult life whole. "Now, tell me what the hell I'm doing in 3 months, from the top, slowly, because if I'm going to lie to the Sandaime for a kid I just met, I want to know exactly which lie to tell." He smiled, that older, quieter smile, and he picked up the scroll from the ground, and he began to talk. She walked back into the Hawkage office 2 hours before dawn with the scroll in her hand and dirt on her boots and her coat open at the collar. Hiruzen looked up from the report he was not reading. He saw the open collar first. His old eyes flicked to it, registered something that was not what he had expected to see, registered, perhaps, a piece of unmarked skin where there should not have been one, and then snapped up to her face. "Anko! Mission complete, Hawkage-sama." She set the scroll on his desk with a small, decisive thump. "The asset is no longer a threat. I have sealed the remains for verification. I would prefer not to discuss the details, with respect." He looked at the scroll. He looked at her collar. He looked at the scroll again. "Anko," he said quietly, "is there something you wish to tell me?" She thought about it. She really did. She thought about how tired he looked. She thought about the man he had been when she was small, before she had been marked, when he had ruffled her hair at a festival and given her candy. She thought about a boy in the forest with very blue eyes who had asked her to choose, and she had chosen. She bowed. "No, Hawkage-sama," she said, "nothing at all." She walked out of the office, and she did not look back, and the door closed behind her with a small, final sound. Behind her, the Sandaime sat at his desk for a long time without moving. He looked at the scroll. He did not open it. After a while he picked up his pipe and he tried to light it, and his hands were shaking too much, and he set it down. Outside, the first light of dawn was coming up over the Hokage monument, and somewhere in the village, a boy who was no longer Naruto Uzumaki was walking through an empty street toward a future that had finally begun. Chapter 2. Two snakes in the grass. The boy who was no longer Naruto Uzumaki was, for the moment, a clerk named Tatsuo Hino. Tatsuo had brown hair, brown eyes, an unremarkable chin, and a slight stoop that suggested too many hours bent over ledgers in the Konoha Records Annex. Tatsuo had paperwork. Tatsuo had a desk on the third floor with a wobbly leg that he had complained about twice to maintenance. Tatsuo had, most importantly, a perfectly forged employment record dating back 4 months, slipped quietly into the personnel files by a Chunin clerk named Eamon who owed certain favors to certain people, and had been told only that this was a Hokage-level confidentiality matter. Eamon was wrong about whose Hokage-level confidentiality it was, but that was not Eamon's problem. Naruto stretched his neck, Tatsuo's neck, which was a little stiffer than his own, and turned the page of the ledger in front of him. The clerk's office was warm and smelled like ink and old wood, and 3 other clerks were working at nearby desks with the bored, glazed expression of people who had long since stopped registering each other as individuals. Perfect. He had picked this department for exactly that reason. Nobody looked twice at a body in a chair if the body in the chair was doing its job. What Tatsuo was actually doing behind the cover of the ledger was reading the budget allocations for the last fiscal quarter of the Foundation's Blackline Operating Fund. It was not a fund that officially existed. Danzo had buried it under 3 shell departments and a handful of expense categories that read like they had been invented by a man who had never bought groceries, miscellaneous archival supplies, rural inspection per diem, interdepartmental couriers, special handling. Naruto had been pulling on these threads for 3 months now in his off hours, and the picture coming together was uglier than he had expected, which was saying something, because he had expected it to be very ugly. He turned another page. The door to the records office opened. He did not look up. Tatsuo would not look up. Tatsuo had no reason to look up. A shadow fell across his ledger. Hino-san. He looked up then with the mild, slightly distracted expression of a man who had been deep in numbers. The Chunin standing at his desk was a thin young woman with her hair in a tight braid and a clipboard under her arm. He didn't recognize her. That was fine. He had cultivated very carefully the kind of face that other people felt they had probably met somewhere before but couldn't quite place. Yes! Internal courier transfer. They need a second-shift clerk in the Forest of Death Proctor's office through the end of the exams. Your name came up. She tapped her clipboard. 3 weeks, evenings only, you keep your day post. Hazard pays good. He pretended to consider. He had been waiting for this transfer for a week. He had, in point of fact, arranged it. Why me? Proctor Mitarashi asked for you by name. He did not smile. Tatsuo did not have a smile worth using, but somewhere behind Tatsuo's brown eyes a 13-year-old boy thought of course she did, you menace, and reached for his stamp. All right, tell her I'll be there at 6. The Chunin made a note, nodded, and left. He went back to the ledger. 3 desks over, a man named Bunzo, who had been working in this office for 19 years, sneezed twice and asked if anyone had a handkerchief. Nobody did. Tatsuo finished his page, signed it, and turned to the next. The Forest of Death Proctor's office was a low, square building near the south gate of Training Ground 44, half buried in ivy, lit at this hour by one overworked lamp in the window. Anko was already inside when he ducked under the doorframe at 5 minutes to 6. She was sitting on the edge of the desk in full Proctor's coat, eating dango out of a paper cone, and she looked up at him with a wicked little grin that she had been visibly practicing in private. Hino-san, she purred. So glad you could join us. Mitarashi-san, he bowed, exactly the right shallow angle for a clerk addressing a special jonin. You requested me. I did. May I ask why? You may not. She kicked the door shut behind him. The chakra seals on the inside of the frame engaged with a soft, almost musical hum, a privacy ward he had drawn personally 3 nights ago, hidden under a layer of perfectly ordinary office paint. Inside this room, no chakra signature could be read from outside, no sound could carry, no genjutsu could pierce the walls inward or outward. The brown of his eyes flickered just for a second and then settled back. He stood up straight. His shoulders went back. The stoop fell off him like a coat. "Better," Anko said, looking him up and down. "I hate this disguise. You look like someone's wet accountant. That is the point of the disguise. You look like you'd ask a girl out by submitting paperwork." "Anko, what?" She popped another dango ball into her mouth. "I am providing operational feedback. It is unsexy. Adjust accordingly." He sat down in the chair opposite the desk and rubbed his face with one hand, Tatsuo's face. He could feel the henge holding, a faint pressure across the cheekbones, the kind of thing only a seal master noticed in himself. 12 days into the cover and it was getting easier to wear. "Report," he said. She sobered. The grin did not entirely leave her face. It almost never did. He was learning, even when she was being serious. The grin was a feature of the architecture, but the eyes behind it went sharp. "The Sandame is watching me." "How closely?" "Not close, but 2 tails I clocked this week, both A and BU, both pretending very hard to be in those particular alleys for completely innocent reasons. The first one was decent. The second one was cat, and cat is not a tail. Cat is a hammer." She frowned. "He doesn't believe me, Naruto. He took the scroll. He filed the report. He has not opened it. He is letting me walk around the village with my collar unbuttoned, and he is waiting for me to make a mistake. He's allowed to be suspicious. We expected this. I'm not worried about him being suspicious. I'm worried about him being quiet. The old man gets quiet when he's making a decision he doesn't want to make. I've seen it twice. Both times somebody died." Naruto tapped his fingers against the desk. "How's the collar?" he asked after a moment. Her hand went to it before she could stop it, a half-second's reach, the old reflex, checking that the high mesh was in place to hide what was no longer there. She caught herself and laughed a little ruefully. "Habit. The skin's fine. It's better than fine. I haven't had a headache in 9 days. I haven't had the dreams in 11. I didn't realize how loud he was in there until he was gone." She tapped her temple. "It's quiet up here for the first time since I was 12. I keep thinking something's broken. Nothing's broken. I know." She looked at him for a moment, and the grin softened around the edges into something that on her face almost looked shy. "You did that, kid. I haven't said it. I'm saying it. Thank you." He held her eyes. "You're welcome. Don't make it weird." "I wasn't. You were going to." "I really wasn't." She threw the empty dango cone at his head. He caught it without looking. She rolled her eyes. "Second item," she said briskly. "Danzo's people are sniffing. 2 root agents on the perimeter of your old apartment building yesterday morning. They didn't go in. They circled. They were measuring the chakra residue." "Of course they were. You think they'll buy that you're dead? They won't buy it for a second. Danzo knew the Sandame ordered the hit. He engineered the intel that triggered it. He'll be looking for confirmation. When he doesn't find a body in a morgue he can examine, he'll start working through possibilities. The first one will be that you failed and lied about it. The second one will be that I escaped under another face. Which is the truth? Yes," he folded his hands, "which means the next test is coming." She raised an eyebrow. "How soon?" "Tonight, probably, tomorrow at the latest. Root doesn't sit on a hypothesis, they probe it. They'll send someone after you, not me. They'll want to see how you react to pressure now that the curse mark is gone. If you fold, they'll know you were the one who removed it and you're the weak link. If you fight harder than you used to, they'll know it too, but for the opposite reason. They cannot leave the variable untested. You're so sexy when you talk like a war manual." "Anko, what? I'm contributing." "Continue." He pinched the bridge of his nose. The boy underneath the henge wanted, very badly, to grin. He did not let it through. He had built this discipline carefully, and it was useful, and he was not going to let it slip just because a woman with dango on her fingers had decided, somewhere between the forest of death and tonight, that she was going to spend the next decade being a problem he was glad to have. "When they come," he said, "I want you to fold, not all the way, just enough to make them think you're rattled. Let them see you flinch. Let them think the mark coming off cost you something. Don't kill them. Mark them. I'll give you a sealing tag. You press it to skin in passing, doesn't matter where. I want to be able to follow them home. You want me to play wounded. I want you to play bait. There's a difference. There absolutely is not. There is in the sense that you personally are not in any actual danger, because if they go past a certain line, I will be there inside of 3 seconds. She tilted her head, considering. You know what, kid? I think that might be the most romantic thing anyone has ever said to me. Please be serious. I am being deeply serious. I have not been protected by a man my entire adult life. It is doing something to me. I would like you to know that. He gave up. He let the smile come, just the one, just for her, and Tatsuo's mild brown face did not entirely fit it, but he didn't care. It was past 6, and the privacy seals were up, and nobody else was watching. Anko, yeah. After this is done, after the exams, after Orochimaru, after Danzo, I am going to take you to dinner somewhere with tablecloths. I am going to do it correctly. I am going to be old enough that nobody in the restaurant raises an eyebrow, and I am going to spend a great deal of money on wine I do not know how to pronounce, and you are going to be insufferable about it, and I am going to enjoy every minute of it. Is that understood? She stared at him for a long, long moment. Then she said very quietly, Yeah, brat, that's understood. The privacy seals hummed in the silence between them. After a minute she cleared her throat, hopped off the desk, and tossed him a thick folder. Right, third item, the proctor assignments for the second exam. Ibiki finalized them this morning. Have a look. Tell me what you see. He opened the folder. He read 3 pages. He looked up. Anko, he said, why is Kabuto Yakushi listed as a registered participant in this year's exams? I was hoping you'd notice that. He's 21 years old and he's failed 7 Chunin exams. Mum, he's failed them on purpose. Looks that way. And nobody is asking why. Nobody is asking why, she agreed pleasantly, because everyone assumes he's a slow learner with a medical specialty who doesn't want to leave his comfortable rank, which is what he wants everyone to assume, including Ibiki, including me 6 months ago. She tapped the page. But I just spent 2 weeks with my head clear for the first time in a decade, kid, and I have been rereading old files, and Yakushi-kun has been at every interesting funeral in Konoha for the last 3 years. He's Orochimaru's. He is so Orochimaru's it's almost insulting that nobody's caught it. Naruto closed the folder very slowly. That's our window, he said. If Kabuto is the inside man, he is the one carrying the operational details. The signal that brings the sound forces in. The route they use through the wards. He'll have it on him during the second exam. He has to, because he's not going to risk a meeting with Orochimaru once the exams begin. We don't move on Orochimaru yet. We move on Kabuto. We take what he's carrying. We rewrite the route. We let the invasion come through a door we control, into a room we've prepared, and we close it behind them. Anko whistled, low and impressed. You've been thinking about this. I have been thinking about this since I was 9 years old. Since you were, she stopped. She looked at him. Naruto, how long have you actually been planning all of this? The real answer. He met her eyes. Since the night the Sandaime sat me down when I was 9, he said, and told me what was sealed inside me, and why the village treated me the way it did, and I went home and looked in the mirror and realized that the man who had told me had been crying when he said it and had still not in 9 years done a single concrete thing to make it stop. That night. That's when I started. She was quiet for a long moment. You were a baby, kid. I was an Uzumaki, he said. We grow up fast when we have to. She reached out then, slowly, and she put her hand flat against the side of Tatsuo's mild, unremarkable face. Her thumb brushed his cheekbone. She held it there. Take this off, she said softly. Just for a second, I want to see you. He hesitated. Then he reached up, made a small seal under her palm, and Tatsuo melted off him like rain off a window. Naruto Uzumaki sat in the proctor's office of the Forest of Death with messy yellow hair and 3 whisker marks on each cheek and very, very blue eyes. And Anko Mitarashi looked at him in the lamplight for a long moment, and she did not say anything at all. Then she leaned forward very deliberately, and she kissed him on the forehead exactly once with the kind of care a person uses when they are setting down something that they cannot afford to drop. She sat back. Put your face back on, brat, she said. We've got work. He put his face back on. The route agent came for her that night. She had walked home the long way on purpose, through 3 of the worst parts of the village, the kind of streets where a special Jonin's reputation usually kept the wolves indoors. Tonight the wolves were curious. She felt the first tail at the canal bridge and the second one a block later, and she did not turn around, and she did not change her pace, and she let her shoulders drop just a little. The smallest possible suggestion of someone whose stride was a fraction less certain than it had been a month ago. The bait was set. It went off in the alley behind the dumpling shop on Sandame Street. She knew the alley. She had used it herself more than once for exactly this kind of work. Narrow, blind on both ends, no civilian windows overlooking. A single overhead lantern that someone had broken 3 weeks ago and the maintenance crew had not yet replaced. A nice quiet place for a chat. The route agent dropped down in front of her from the eaves. Mask, plain dark uniform, short tanto already drawn and held low along the thigh. No flourish, no greeting. He moved straight into the killing distance with the smoothness of a man who had been trained out of every habit that wasn't strictly efficient. Anko had been ready for him for half a block. She let him cut her. Not deep she would not have permitted deep, but a real cut, a shallow line across the meat of her left forearm, drawn by the tanto as she let her parry come in a half-beat slow. Blood beaded. He registered the hit with the smallest possible tilt of the mask. Confirmation. She was slower than she had been a month ago. Confirmation, the mark removed had cost her. She let her breath stutter. She let her killing intent waver. She let him think he had her measure. Then, as he stepped through for the second cut, she put her left palm flat against the front of his uniform, exactly over the sternum, and she pressed. The seal tag transferred clean. He didn't feel it. They never did when it was drawn properly. Naruto had been very specific about the strokes. The tag bonded to the inside of the cloth, invisible, inert until activated. Leaking the faintest possible chakra echo on a frequency only one person in the village was tuned to read. He stepped back. He was already turning to disengage. Root didn't finish kills they didn't need to, and he had what he came for, and Anko allowed herself one small performative flinch as he vaulted to the rooftops and was gone. She stood in the alley for a count of 10, holding her bleeding arm, breathing the way a woman breathes when she has just been reminded of her own mortality. Then she straightened up, wrapped her arm with a strip torn from her own coat, and walked the rest of the way home humming under her breath. Across the village, in a small clerk's apartment with the lights off, Naruto Uzumaki sat at a low table with his eyes closed and his hands flat on a sheet of paper, and he watched a small dot of light move across the inside of his eyelids, east through the merchant quarter, north along the old wall, east again past a place where the chakra trace flickered as the agent passed through a known root cloaking field, and then down, sharply down into the earth. He opened his eyes. He smiled. "Hello, Danzo," he said quietly to no one. 2 nights later, he and Anko were eating dango on the roof of the Hawkage Tower at 1 in the morning, which was, all things considered, the safest place in the village to have a strategy meeting because no one ever looked up. "You're sure about the location," she said, around a mouthful. "I mapped the chakra trace for 30 hours. He surfaced once to file his report, then went back down. The entrance is under the old shrine in the Northwest Reservoir District. There are at least 3 sublevels. The traffic is enough that I make it for the central facility, not a satellite. You want to hit it? Not yet. Good, because if we hit it before the exams, Danzo knows we're coming and the whole rest of the plan collapses." "Exactly." She licked sauce off her thumb thoughtfully. "Then what do we do with the information?" "We sit on it. We feed Hiruzen a piece of it anonymously after the exams begin. Enough to make him suspicious of Danzo, but not enough to make him move yet. Then when Orochimaru's attack hits, the old man's mind will already be primed to wonder where the intelligence failure started. He'll start asking the right questions on his own. You are scary, Naruto-kun. I'm thorough. That's what I said." He grinned around his stick. A breeze came up off the village, carrying the smell of late summer rain and wood smoke from somebody's late dinner. The Hawkage monument loomed at their backs, 4 stone faces watching nothing. Anko stretched her legs out along the tile and let her shoulder brush his just lightly, just enough. "Can I ask you something?" she said after a while. "Always." The cubi. He didn't tense. She'd half expected him to. He just took another bite of dango and looked out across the dark rooftops. "What about it?" "Are you," she frowned, looking for the word, "are you okay in there with it?" "With her," he said. "Her. Her name is Kurama. She is older than this village by a lot, and angrier than anything you have ever met, and we have an understanding. You're on a name basis with the 9-tailed fox. We had a long conversation when I was 10. How does a 10-year-old have a long conversation with the nine-tailed fox? Carefully, he said, and with a lot of patience on both sides. She's not Anko, she's not a demon, she's a person. A very large, very angry person who was used as a weapon by people I would happily kill if they weren't all already dead. She doesn't owe this village anything, and she doesn't owe me anything either. But we've worked out an arrangement. She gives me access to as much chakra as I can handle without burning my coils. I don't treat her like a prisoner. When I become Hawkage someday, not soon, but someday, I'm going to find a way to let her out of the seal in a form she chooses, and I'm going to stop being a Jinchuriki, and she's going to go wherever she wants and never have to wear a leash again. She knows this. She's holding me to it. Anko was very quiet for a moment. You promised the nine-tailed fox you'd set her free. I promised Kurama I would set her free. And she believed you. Yes. Why? He thought about it. Because I'm Uzumaki, he said eventually. And the Uzumaki used to be friends with the Biju a long time ago. She remembers. And because nobody has ever offered her anything before that didn't have a hook in it. When I made the offer, there was no hook. She checked. She's been checking for 3 years. There's nothing in it for me except not having a friend in chains. Kid, Anko said softly, you are going to break this village's heart. Probably. In a good way. I hope so. She leaned her head against his shoulder just for a moment. Up here on the roof, with the wind moving and the dango finished and the village asleep below them. Neither of them said anything for a while. Then she sat up, dusted off her coat, and said briskly, Right, so, Kabuto, tell me again how we want to play this. The plan they built that night, over the last of the dango and a stolen pot of jasmine tea, ran like this. Kabuto Yakushi would be allowed to enter the second exam exactly as he intended. He would be allowed to pass through the gates of the Forest of Death with his team. He would be allowed to make whatever contact he intended to make with Team 7, because Sasuke Uchiha was, almost certainly, the bait that Orochimaru still believed he was coming for, and Naruto had decided, after a long internal debate that had involved Kurama's opinion, that Sasuke would in fact be allowed to encounter Orochimaru in the forest, with one very specific modification. The modification was this. Naruto would replace himself, temporarily, with a shadow clone running on a separate seal protocol he had been refining for 2 years. The clone would be indistinguishable from him in every way that mattered. It would carry his chakra signature. It would bleed if cut. It would respond to the Kyubai's chakra exactly the way he did, because Kurama had agreed to allow a fragment of her chakra to anchor the clone for the duration. The clone would meet Sasuke. The clone would meet Orochimaru. The clone would, if necessary, take the bite that Orochimaru meant to give to Sasuke as a distraction. Naruto himself, meanwhile, wearing Tatsuo's face, would be 300 meters east, in the underbrush, with Anko intercepting Kabuto on his way to his rendezvous and taking from him every piece of operational information the Sound's invasion required. Sasuke would not get a curse mark. The clone would. Naruto would then dispel the clone and absorb whatever data the encounter generated. The texture of Orochimaru's chakra, his combat style, the subtle ways he moved when he thought he was unobserved. And Orochimaru, for the first time in his miserable career, would walk out of that forest having gotten exactly what he came for and not understanding that he had just been read like a children's book. It was, Anko said when he finished explaining, an absolutely insane plan. She loved it. She had one note. What? Don't let the clone take the bite for real, she said. The bite has the curse mark in it, even if you can remove it after. I don't want that thing's chakra anywhere near a piece of you for any longer than it has to be. Have the clone dispel itself an instant before the bite lands. Let Orochimaru think it was a successful application that the host immediately rejected. He'll lose his mind. He'll spend a month trying to figure out what went wrong with his technique and not realize the problem was never the technique. He looked at her for a moment. That's better than my plan. I know. I'm going to use that. I know. You're very good at this. I have been a special Jonin since I was 16, brat. I am excellent at this. I'm just usually not allowed to do it on anything important. He grinned. Welcome to important, he said. She raised her teacup. He clinked his against it. The jasmine had gone cold and neither of them cared. The next morning in the records office, Tatsuo Hino arrived on time and signed in and sat down at his desk with the wobbly leg and opened the ledger to the page he had marked. Bunzo, 3 desks over, sneezed. Nobody had a handkerchief. Tatsuo turned a page. Outside the window, the village was waking up, the first stalls opening in the market, a group of academy students running drills in the square below, banners going up along the main street for the opening ceremony of the Chunin exams in 9 days' time. Foreign teams were already arriving at the gate. Sand, mist, grass, rain, the cover for an army. If you knew where to look, he didn't look. Tatsuo wouldn't look. He turned another page. In the margin of the ledger, in his neatest brushstroke, in characters so small they could be mistaken for accidental ink, he wrote a single line for himself to read later, and then closed the book. 9 days, it said. Then everything moves. Chapter 3. The forest remembers 9 days went by the way 9 days go by when you have a plan. Too slowly until the 8th one, and then all at once. On the morning the Chunin exams opened, Naruto Uzumaki, still wearing Tatsuo's mild brown face, still carrying Tatsuo's slight clerical stoop, walked into the academy testing hall behind a clipboard, set a stack of registration forms on a side table, and walked out again without a single one of the assembled genin so much as glancing at him. Sakura was 3 meters from his elbow when he passed. She was arguing with Ino about something in a hissed undertone, and she did not look up. Sasuke was leaning against a wall on the far side of the room with his arms crossed and his eyes half-lidded, and he did not look up either. A shadow clone, sealed inside an unmarked storage scroll tucked under Tatsuo's arm, did not look up because shadow clones in storage scrolls cannot look up. Naruto carried the clone out of the testing hall, down the back stairs, past a janitor's closet, and out into the alley behind the building, where he transferred the scroll to a dead drop point under a loose flagstone. The clone would surface there 24 hours from now on a delayed seal release. By then, Team 7 would be inside the Forest of Death, and the clone, wearing Naruto's real face, carrying Naruto's real chakra, fueled by a strand of Kurama's borrowed power, would walk into their camp as if it had simply gotten separated from them in the chaos of the first exam. Sakura would scold it. Sasuke would ignore it. Neither of them would notice anything wrong, because there would be nothing wrong. The clone would be Naruto in every measurable way except the one that mattered, which was that it was disposable. He tapped the flagstone twice with the toe of his sandal and walked away. Tatsuo had paperwork to file. Ibiki Morino opened the first exam at 1 in the afternoon by walking into the room in full uniform and looking, for 30 unbroken seconds, at every single face in front of him. Anko had told Naruto about this trick at length 2 nights ago on the roof. She had imitated Ibiki's stare so well that Naruto had laughed for a solid minute. It had been a good night. They had eaten too many dumplings, and she had told him a story about her first solo mission as a Chunin, the one where she had accidentally set fire to a brothel in Tea Country, and had been forced to evacuate 18 civilians and a parrot at 3 in the morning while explaining to a very confused proprietress that no, she was not actually a customer, and yes, she would be filing a report. He had liked the parrot in particular. He was thinking about the parrot now, in fact, sitting in a small administrative office on the 2nd floor of the academy building, listening through a chakra-tuned listening seal to Ibiki delivering the rules of the written exam in the room above him. He had stuck the seal to the underside of a desk during the morning sweep. Nobody had noticed. Nobody ever noticed when you put a seal somewhere it was not supposed to be if you put it there confidently enough. Ibiki was good. Naruto could tell, even through the seal, that the man's killing intent was calibrated to exactly the right pressure to break a room of genin in roughly the order they deserved breaking. Half the foreign teams would crack on questions 4 through 9. A third of the Konoha teams would crack on the 10th question bluff. The ones who held, and there would be more of them than Ibiki was expecting. This year, because this year the village had pushed an unusually competent class through the academy, would proceed to the 2nd exam in the Forest of Death, where the real winnowing happened. He listened to the 10th question come down. He listened to the room go still. He listened to a few chairs scrape back as the weakest broke. He listened to Sakura's voice, faint and far away through the seal, say something that he had to strain to catch, and that turned out to be a furious whispered argument with herself about whether Sasuke was going to quit, which made him smile. Then he heard the 10th question be revealed for what it actually was, the bluff, the trap, the test of nerve, and he heard the survivors realize all at once that they had just passed. Tatsuo turned a page of the ledger on his desk. The privacy door clicked behind him. He did not turn around. "You're late," he said mildly. "I am precisely on time," Anko replied. "You are early. There is a difference." He set down his brush, peeled the listening seal off the underside of his desk with one finger, and rolled it into a small dark pellet that he flicked into a brazier on the windowsill. The pellet hissed once and was gone. He turned around. Anko was leaning in the doorway in her full proctor's coat, her mesh shirt high at the throat, a habit still even now, her thigh holster freshly stocked, and her grin as wide and as wicked as he had ever seen it. She was vibrating slightly. He could feel it from across the room. She had been waiting 9 days for this, and she was, finally, about to be allowed to play. "You ready for me, brat?" "Always. Romantic. Get up. The second exam opens in 30 minutes, and I have a speech to give." He stood. He shook Tatsuo off him like a man taking off a coat at the end of a long day. The henge dissolved. Blonde hair, blue eyes, whisker marks, all of it back where it belonged. He rolled his shoulders. He sighed audibly with the relief of a person who had been holding the same face for 9 days and was glad to put it down. Anko was watching him. "What? Nothing. You're staring. I'm appreciating. There's a difference. Are we ready on the clone?" "Drops primed. Releases in 23 hours. It'll surface in the forest at the eastern stream just before sunset tomorrow and walk itself into Team 7's camp. And the Kabuto intercept? He'll move at hour 12 to make the rendezvous with the sound team carrying his report. I've mapped the route. He'll cut north through the second growth past the river fork, and we'll be on him before he reaches the meeting clearing. And if Orochimaru shows earlier than we expect, then the clone takes the meeting and we adjust. Kurama's anchored to it. She'll let me know the second anything goes sideways. And if Danzo moves while everyone is in the forest," he paused. "Then," he said, "we have a problem, but I have a contingency." "Of course you do. What is it?" "I'll tell you if it becomes relevant." "Naruto." "Anko," she narrowed her eyes at him. "You are not allowed," she said, "to have contingencies you don't tell me about. We talked about this." "It's not a contingency I'm hiding from you," he said. "It's a contingency I'm hiding from myself until I need it. There's a difference." She opened her mouth. She closed it. She opened it again. "That," she said, "is somehow even worse, and I want to be angry, and I cannot, because it is the kind of nonsense I would also say. Get out of my office. Go be somewhere useful. I have to go scare children." He grinned. He kissed the top of her head, quickly, lightly, because they had been doing this for about 4 days now, and neither of them had quite decided what it was yet, but neither of them was stopping. And he ducked past her into the corridor with Tatsuo's face already settling back over his bones. Behind him, Anko Mitarashi stood alone in the office for about 10 seconds with her hand pressed to the top of her head, and then she laughed, short and surprised, and went out to give her speech. The second exam opened the way Anko opened things, which was loudly. She landed in front of the gates of Training Ground 44 in the middle of a small explosion of leaves, and announced herself as the proctor for the second test, with a degree of theatricality that had at least 3 foreign chunin reaching for weapons before their Jonin sensei could grab their wrists. She walked the line of assembled genin. She licked blood off the cheek of a grass kunoichi who tried to surprise her with a kunai, and gave the kunai back with a smile that made the grass genin's whole team take a step back. She handed out consent forms, because if you die in there, kiddies, the village wants to make sure your parents can't sue, and she handed them out with relish. Naruto watched all of it from the rear of the proctor's tent in henge, holding a clipboard he was not actually using. He had insisted on being present. Anko had insisted he stay in disguise. They had compromised by him being present in disguise, which was usually how their compromises went. The grass kunoichi was the one. He knew it the second she licked her own kunai. The shape of the killing intent that came off her under the false skin was wrong in the specific way that only Orochimaru's killing intent was wrong, too smooth, too patient, the predator stillness of a snake that has decided it has all afternoon. Naruto's stomach turned over once. He let it. He breathed through it. He counted to 10 in the back of his head in Uzumaki numerals, the way his mother's clan had counted, the way Kurama had taught him because Kurama remembered the Uzumaki when they were alive. "Smooth, Kit," a voice said behind his eyes, dry and amused. "You're vibrating. She licked my proctor. Your proctor licked her back. They're even. Kurama, I'm just saying." Anko Mitarashi is a more dangerous animal than that woman in the grass coat, and Anko Mitarashi has met you. Hold your nerve. He held his nerve. He let the grass Kanoichi walk past him without so much as a flicker. He let her team pass. He let all of the teams pass in their staggered intervals into the forest of death until the gates closed and the gong rang and the second exam had officially begun. Anko came back into the tent, peeled off her coat, threw it across a folding chair and said, "Right, now we work." They worked. The proctor's tent at the south gate became, for the next 36 hours, the most quietly busy operations center in the village. To the other proctors and the Chunin runners, it looked exactly the way it was supposed to look. A senior special jonin coordinating signal flags from the perimeter, a junior clerk handling the paperwork, and nobody who came in and out had any reason to look twice at either of them. Behind the privacy seals on the inner wall, Naruto had spread out a chakra paper map of the entire training ground, keyed to 4 dozen marker seals he had placed in the forest over the past week. Every team showed up as a small pulse of light. He could see them moving. He could see Team 7 currently arguing about water in the southwest quadrant. He could see the Grass Kanoichi's team, Orochimaru's team, circling slowly toward them from the north. He could see Kabuto's team near the central tower, exactly where he had been expected to be, and he could see, faintly, 2 unmarked pulses near the western edge of the map that were not registered participants and that he had pegged hours ago as route. 2 route in the forest, he said without looking up. Watching the exam, watching us. They came in over the wall about an hour after the gates closed. They've been holding position since. They want to see what we do. They do. Anko leaned over his shoulder to look at the map. Her hair smelled like dango syrup, which he had stopped finding funny and started finding distracting, which was a problem for later. "Are we going to let them?" "For now, they can't see what we're doing in here. The seals are good. They can only watch the tent. As long as the tent does normal tent things, they'll stay parked, and that's 2 route assets we know the location of, which is 2 more than we knew this morning. Naruto-kun, I have to tell you, watching you run an operation is doing very specific things to me. Anko, I am only saying, please go check the perimeter. I am going. Please go check it slowly and away from me. I am going slowly and away from you. Look at me going." She went, swaying just enough to make the point, and he put both palms flat on the map and stared at it for 10 full seconds without seeing any of it before he got his focus back. Kurama, behind his eyes, was laughing harder than he had ever heard her laugh. "Shut up," he thought. "Make me, Kit." He got his focus back. He watched the map. Hour 11 of the second exam was when Orochimaru, in the Grass Kanoichi's body, wearing the Grass Kanoichi's face, caught up to Team 7 in a clearing south of the river. Naruto felt it through the marker seal he had embedded in his clone's chakra signature. The clone had surfaced from the dead drop an hour earlier and walked itself into Team 7's camp exactly as planned. Sakura had scolded it for getting separated. Sasuke had grunted. The clone had grinned and apologized and produced a canteen, and the team had gone back to moving. Standard operations. Now the killing intent hit them. He felt it through the clone's connection. The cold, gut-deep pressure of a man-shaped thing deciding it was hungry, and he felt Sakura freeze, and he felt Sasuke's hands go white-knuckled on his kunai, and he felt the clone, very deliberately, do exactly what he had told it to do, which was to let Naruto's real reaction show. The clone went pale. The clone's hand shook. The clone smiled anyway, the way Naruto would have smiled, wide and stupid and full of bluff, and the clone stepped between his teammates and the Grass Kanoichi and said in Naruto's voice, "Hey, lady, whatever your problem is, you're going to have to go through me first." It was the right line. It was exactly the line Orochimaru would expect from the boy he had been told carried the 9 tails. It would draw him forward. It drew him forward. Orochimaru shed the kunoichi's face, not all the way, just enough, the long pale neck extending, the yellow eyes opening to their full slit-pupilled width, and Naruto in the proctor's tent 300 meters east watched the marker seal on his clone pulse once hot and felt a pressure in his own chest that he had been waiting for his entire conscious life. He's there, he thought. He's there, Kurama agreed. Hold the clone, don't flinch. He held the clone. Sasuke moved. That was the part he had not been able to predict. He had known Sasuke was proud, and he had known the clone's bluff would shame him into action, but he had not known how. Sasuke threw himself at Orochimaru with the kind of suicidal precision that Uchiha had been throwing themselves at things with for several centuries, and Orochimaru, mildly amused, swatted him into a tree. Sakura screamed Sasuke's name. The clone moved. It was not Naruto's full speed. Naruto had been very careful, over months of practice, about exactly how fast his clone was allowed to move when other people were watching. About 2/3 of his real speed, with the same chakra cost profile, the same techniques, the same tells, but 2/3 of his real speed, in the body of a 13-year-old fueled by a strand of the 9 tails, was still considerably faster than anything Sasuke or Sakura had ever seen him do. The clone caught Orochimaru's wrist mid-strike before Orochimaru could PL more actions continue / next chapter 4. The sound and the fury Hiruzen Sarutobi was waiting for them. He was waiting in his office, alone, with the door unlocked and the ANBU dismissed from the corners and the pipe unlit on his desk. He was sitting in his chair the way an old man sits when he has decided to stop pretending he is anything other than tired, and he looked up when Anko ducked through the door and did not look surprised to see Tatsuo Hino half a step behind her. "Close the door," he said. Anko closed the door. Naruto, in henge, closed his eyes for half a second. He had felt the privacy seals in the room engage as the door clicked shut, old seals, Sandaime-tier seals. The kind that had been drawn into the walls of the Hokage office when the office was new and that nobody but the Hokage himself could activate. They were good seals. They were not as good as the ones Naruto had drawn under the proctor's tent, but they were good, and they meant that whatever happened in this room in the next 10 minutes was not going to leave it. He breathed out. He dropped the henge. Tatsuo Hino dissolved off him for the 3rd time that day, and Naruto Uzumaki stood in front of the Sandaime Hokage in his proctor blacks with his hands at his sides and his eyes on the old man's face, and he waited. Hiruzen looked at him for a long, long time. He did not look angry. He did not look afraid. He did not, in fact, look surprised. What he looked more than anything was sad, the deep-settled sadness of a man who had been suspecting something for a while and had not wanted to be right. "How long?" he said quietly. "I'm sorry. How long have you been operating in my village under my nose, Naruto-kun?" 3 years, Hokage-sama. "And how much of what I have been told about you in those 3 years has been true?" "The reports from Iruka-sensei are mostly true. The reports from the academy as a whole are calibrated to the picture I wanted them to have. The reports from the patrol shinobi who have caught me painting the monument are absolutely true. I did do that, and I enjoyed it. The reports from ANBU Shadow Detail are about 50% true. The rest I edited." "You edited ANBU reports?" "Yes, sir." Hiruzen closed his eyes for a moment. He opened them again. "Anko, Hokage-sama, your mission report, the one I have not yet opened, is the body in the scroll Naruto's?" "No, sir." "Whose is it?" "A missing nin from Kusagakure named Daichai Sora, killed by Naruto 3 weeks before the order was issued. Blood type and approximate build match, sealed and prepared in advance in expectation that the order would come." "In expectation that the order would come?" "Yes, sir. You did not know about this in advance?" "No, sir. I learned of it on the night I was sent to kill him. He had prepared the contingency without me. The scroll was already in his apartment before I crossed the threshold of yours." Hiruzen looked at her. Then he looked at Naruto. Then he looked at his unlit pipe on the desk in front of him, and he picked it up, and he turned it over in his hands twice, and he set it back down. "You expected me to send someone." "I expected Danzo to push you to send someone," Naruto said. "He has been priming you for it for 8 months. I have been monitoring his intelligence drops to your office through 3 separate cutouts. I know which reports of his you read in full and which you skim. I know which of your council meetings he attends in person and which he attends by proxy. I know who in this tower writes you memos he has dictated. I know, Hokage-sama, exactly how this office is being managed around you, and I know who is doing the managing, and I have been waiting to bring you the evidence in a form you could not dismiss. And the form you have chosen is your own staged death. The form I have chosen, Naruto said quietly, is the operational packet currently in Anko-san's pocket, which contains the complete plan for Orochimaru's invasion of this village in 9 days' time, and which I am about to set on your desk. I needed to be dead, Hokage-sama, in order to be free to acquire it. As long as you believed I was alive and compromised, you could not have used me, and as long as Danzo believed I was alive, his agents would have been on me too tightly for me to operate. The death served 2 purposes. I am sorry for the third one, which was that it caused you grief. I did not enjoy that part. The Sandame's hands had gone very still on the arms of his chair. Anko, sir, the packet. She crossed the room. She set the oilskin packet on the desk in front of him. She stepped back. He opened it. He read. It took him about 4 minutes. Naruto watched the old man's face go from carefully blank to slowly focused to deeply still, and then to something that was not quite fury and not quite grief, but had the quality of both at once, the look of a man reading a death sentence written in his own handwriting and recognizing the strokes. He closed the packet. He set it down. He looked up. The wards, he said, the 7 points of breach listed here, these are accurate. They are accurate, Hokage-sama. I have verified 6 of them personally. The 7th I could not approach without alerting the perimeter sensors, but the documentation matches the pattern. And the timetable, 9 days from today, beginning at the 3rd bell of the final exam round. The Keizukage in attendance will be a substitute. The substitute is Orochimaru himself. Hiruzen closed his eyes. He breathed in, he breathed out. When he opened his eyes again, the tiredness was still in them, but there was something else underneath it now, something that Naruto recognized from old photographs, the look of the man the Sandame had been once before 3 wars and 40 years of office had worn him down. The professor, the god of Shinobi. The man who had been Hokage when the 4th had been a child running through these streets, and who had become Hokage again when the 4th had died for these streets. Naruto-kun. Sir, I owe you an apology that I do not know how to make. You don't owe me one, Hokage-sama. I sent a special Jonin to kill you in your sleep on the word of a man who I have known for 50 years to be a liar. I have known he was a liar, and I have used him anyway, because I believed he could be useful when properly leashed. I have been wrong. I have been wrong for a long time. And the price of my wrongness was almost the life of my predecessor's son, on a night when you were 13 years old and had done nothing wrong. So, he met Naruto's eyes. I do owe you an apology, and I do not know how to make it, and I am going to keep trying for the rest of the time I have. Will you let me? Naruto held his eyes for a long, long moment. Then he said quietly, Yes, Gigi, I'll let you. Anko behind him made a small noise that might have been a laugh and might have been a sob and was almost certainly both. She did not interrupt. Hiruzen nodded once. Then he straightened in his chair, and the old man receded a little, and the Hokage came forward, and he said, Tell me what you need from me. What Naruto needed from him was this. He needed the Sandame to do nothing about Danzo for 9 days. Not arrest him. Not confront him. Not so much as alter the pattern of council meetings in a way that would tell Danzo he had been made. Danzo was the kind of animal that smelled a trap from 3 kilometers off and went to ground the second he caught the scent. And Naruto had spent 3 years building a position from which Danzo could be taken cleanly in one move, with all of his root assets in custody and all of his black files in evidence. And he was not going to surrender that position because the Sandame's pride wanted a fight in his own office. He needed the Sandame to quietly reposition the village's defensive forces over the next 9 days in patterns that would look like the patterns Danzo and Orochimaru had been told to expect, but would actually leave the 7 breach points covered by Naruto's own asset. Naruto had names. He had already vetted them. He gave them to Hiruzen on a single sheet of paper that he produced from inside his sleeve and laid on the desk. 17 Jonin, 23 Chunin, 4 ANBU captains whose loyalty Naruto had personally verified by methods he did not describe. The Sandame read the list. He raised his eyebrows once at the 4th name. He did not ask. He needed the Sandame to put Anko Mitarashi in operational command of the village's counter-invasion response, effective immediately, and to make the assignment quietly enough that Danzo would not learn of it until it was too late to matter. Anko, when he said this, opened her mouth, closed it, and turned and stared at Naruto with the expression of a woman who had not been consulted about a piece of her own life. He stared back. She shut her mouth. The Sandame, watching this exchange, almost smiled. "Granted," he said. "Anko, you will receive your orders through the standard channel within the hour. Pretend to be surprised." "I will be deeply surprised, sir." "Good." And finally, Naruto needed the Sandame to send one piece of information through one specific cutout to one specific person at one specific hour on the 7th day from now. The information was a single line of text. The cutout was a tuning clerk Naruto named by full name and posting. The person was Jiraiya of the Sannin. The hour was the 2nd hour after midnight. The Sandame read the line of text. He read it again. He looked up at Naruto. "You have been in contact with Jiraiya for 2 years, Jiji, through a dead drop in Tanzaku town. He does not know my real situation. He thinks I am an Uzumaki sympathizer in the Konoha Records office who has been feeding him intelligence on Akatsuki movements. He has been feeding me intelligence on Orochimaru in exchange. The arrangement has been mutually productive. You have been running an intelligence exchange with one of the Sannin without his knowledge of your identity." "Yes, sir." "Naruto-kun, sir, you are 13 years old." "I am Uzumaki," Naruto said, "and my godfather did not come to see me for 13 years, and I needed information that he had, so I built a channel he would respect. When he learns who has been on the other end of it, I expect him to be very angry for about an hour and then to laugh for about a week. He is that kind of man." Hiruzen looked at him for a long moment. Then he laughed himself, a short, startled, rusty laugh that sounded as though it had not been used in a while, and he shook his head and he said, "Yes, yes, he is exactly that kind of man. Minato would be Naruto-kun. Your father would be so very proud of you and also so very alarmed, and I think he would have those reactions in roughly equal measure. Send the line through the channel. I'll authorize it personally. Is there anything else? One more thing. Name it." "When the invasion comes," Naruto said quietly, "Orochimaru is going to try for you, personally. He's going to seal the roof of the arena and put you in a 4-corner barrier with him inside it, and he is going to try to kill you with the bodies of the 1st and the 2nd Hokage, which he has prepared a jutsu to summon. I have known about this jutsu for 6 months. He calls it Edo Tensei. It uses living sacrifices, and it brings back the dead with their full abilities and their memories, and they will broken to the user's command." The Sandame had gone very still. "That is not possible." "It is, Jiji. He's done it. I have seen the preparations through Jiraiya's intelligence. When he does it to you, you cannot win that fight on his terms. The 1st and the 2nd together, controlled, will go through you in about 20 minutes even at your peak, which you are not at. You will try to use the Reaper Death Seal. You will succeed. It will kill you. I would like you," he said very steadily, "to not do that." Hiruzen looked at him for a very long time. "Naruto." "Yes, Jiji. Are you telling me you have seen me die?" "I am telling you," Naruto said, "that I have read every scenario for the next 9 days that I could read, and that in every one where you fight Orochimaru alone, you die. I am telling you that I have built a plan in which you do not fight him alone, and in which the 4-corner barrier is broken from the outside before he can complete the Edo Tensei, and in which the 1st and the 2nd do not get to be desecrated, and in which you live, Jiji, and the village lives, and Orochimaru leaves this village in a worse state than he entered it. I am asking you to trust me on the 7th day when the line goes out to Jiraiya. I am asking you to not be a hero. I am asking you to be the Hokage of a village that needs you to be alive on the other side of this, and to let 2 other people be the heroes for 1 afternoon." Anko, very quietly in the corner, said, Two, you and me and you." She did not respond to that for a moment. Then she said, equally quietly, "Okay, brat, okay." Hiruzen Sarutobi looked at them both. He looked at the unlit pipe on his desk. He looked at the list of names he had not yet picked up. He looked, finally, at his hands and at how old they had become without him noticing, and he set them flat on the surface of the desk and pushed himself up, slowly, to his feet. "Naruto-kun, Jiji, I accept your terms. Thank you, on one condition. Name it. When this is over, the Sanddame said, I want you to put your real face back on, and I want you to come to dinner at my house, and I want you to let me cook for you the way I should have cooked for you 10 years ago and did not. And I want Anko to come with you, because if my eyes are not deceiving me, which they often do these days, but not, I think, on this, she is going to be sitting at every dinner you eat for the rest of your life, and I would like to begin getting to know her in that capacity now rather than later. Is that acceptable? Naruto's mouth opened. Anko's mouth opened. Both of them closed at exactly the same time. Yes, Jiji, Naruto said. Yes, Hokage-sama, Anko said, perhaps a half-second later in a voice that was very nearly steady. Good. The old man permitted himself, finally, a small, real smile. Then we have an understanding. Go, both of you. Get out of my office before I think too hard about any of what just happened and have a stroke. They went. Behind them, in the office, the Sanddame Hokage stood at his desk for a long moment with his hands flat on the wood. And then he picked up his pipe, and he lit it, and the first draw on it made him cough, and he laughed once quietly and went to work. The 7 days that followed were the strangest 7 days of Anko Mitarashi's life, and she had once spent an afternoon helping Ibiki Morino interrogate a man who had only been willing to talk through a hand puppet, so this was saying something. Officially, she was on routine proctor duty for the conclusion of the second exam and the lead-up to the finals. Unofficially, she was running the largest covert defensive operation in the village's recent history. Her ops room was a converted storage closet in the basement of the T&I building. Her staff was 4 hand-picked chunin who had been told only that this was a Hokage-level confidentiality matter and would be told everything else after the fact. Her direct line was to the Sanddame's private office, by way of a courier seal Naruto had drawn into the floorboards. Her boyfriend and the word still felt strange to her, although she had decided 3 nights ago that it was the right word and was using it in her head with increasing comfort, was, on the second day, a clerk named Tatsuo Hino. On the third day, he was an Genbyu supplemental named Kazuki who had been quietly seconded to her ops room. On the 4th day, he was a Hokage Tower courier, with the surprisingly convincing name of Mori. On the 5th day, he came in through her bedroom window at 1 in the morning as himself, dropped onto the foot of her bed in a heap, and informed her, with the air of a man delivering a status report to his commanding officer, that he had located all 4 of the Sound 4 and tagged each of them individually with location seals, and that he was now going to fall asleep on her, with her permission, because he had been awake for 31 hours. She had given her permission. He had fallen asleep on her. She had stayed awake another 2 hours, sitting up against the headboard with one hand in his hair, watching him breathe and thinking about how completely her life had reorganized itself around a 13-year-old boy in 3 months, and how she was not, on examination, the least bit sorry about it. That had been the 5th night. On the 6th night, the root agents made their move. It came in clean, the way these things came in when they were done by professionals. No theatrics, no announcement. 3 figures dropping silently onto the roof of the T&I building at the hour between the 3rd and 4th shift change, when the perimeter watches were rotating and the cross-checks were a half-second slow. They moved in a triangle, fanning out across the rooftop, and they were inside the upper ventilation shaft and dropping into the 3rd-floor corridor before the chunin at the night desk had finished his 2nd cup of tea. Anko, in the basement ops room, felt the marker seals trip 3 seconds after the agents entered the building. She was already moving. Her teacup went over. Her 4 chunin, who had been trained over the past 6 days to respond to specific tone signals from her without questions, scattered to their assigned posts. She was up the stairs at speed. She came out into the 2nd-floor corridor as the first root agent dropped through the ceiling tile. She did not pause. She had not in 3 months used her full speed in front of anyone except Naruto because there had been no occasion to and because reputation management had been important. There was an occasion now. The agent's tanto was halfway out of its sheath when her elbow took him in the throat. He went down without sound. The 2nd agent, 2 meters behind, had time to register what had happened to the first and to begin a hand seal. Root used a modified silent seal system that did not require vocalization. and Anko's kunai went through the back of his hand before his fingers could close. He flinched, finally and humanly, and she had him on the ground with her knee in the small of his back and a second kunai under his jawline before he could remember what training had told him to do about pain. The third agent had not come through the ceiling. The third agent had been the bait, and the bait was the one watching from the rooftop, waiting to see whether Anko Mitarashi would, on response, exceed the operational profile she was supposed to have. She had exceeded it. She felt the third agent on the rooftop register it, felt the killing intent above her sharpen and then withdraw, seen, confirmed, retreating, and she was already releasing the prisoner to her chunin and moving for the stairs. She did not make it to the stairs. She did not need to. Naruto came down through the skylight at the end of the corridor in a streak of yellow that her eyes barely tracked, hit the rooftop above her head with a sound she felt in her ribs, and a second later the third root agent dropped through the same skylight, unconscious, bound at wrist and ankle with a length of seal cord, and landed neatly at her feet. Naruto followed him down a moment later, landed lightly and dusted his hands. "Hey," he said, "hey yourself." He was good. He almost made it to the next rooftop. "Tied up nicely, though. I've been practicing. The cord's a new design. It cinches under chakra strain. I'll show you later." "Naruto, how did you get from your safe house to this roof in 12 seconds? He considered. "I have a new technique." "You have a new technique?" "I've been working on it for about a year. I wasn't sure it would work in the field. It works in the field. We can talk about it later." "Naruto, yeah, it's the fourths, isn't it?" He blinked. Then he grinned, slow and a little sheepish, the boyish grin she got to see less and less often these days, and was grateful for every time it surfaced, and he said, "Yeah, it's the fourths. I cracked it last spring. I had to. It was on the list." "What list?" "The list of things I needed to know before this week." She closed her eyes for a moment. She opened them. She looked down at 3 unconscious root agents on the floor of her corridor. She said, "I am going to need a drink after all of this is over. Tablecloths, tablecloths. It's a date." "It is a date, brat." The chunin at the end of the corridor, who had been pretending very hard not to listen to any of this, coughed politely. Anko snapped back into command voice. "Right, you 3. Get these prisoners into the holding cells on level B2, individual rooms, full chakra suppression seals. Nobody talks to them. Nobody looks at them. The Hokage will arrive in the morning to handle the interrogation personally." "Move." They moved. She turned back to Naruto. "Are there going to be more tonight?" "Probably not. 3 was the standard probe and confirm pattern. If they didn't get clean data, Danzo will pull his next move forward to coincide with the invasion. We've got 2 days. Anything else he tries before then, he'll telegraph hard enough that we'll see it coming." "Good, then go home. You're home, the safe house home. Sleep. I need you sharp on the day." "You sleep too." "I will sleep when I am done." "Anko, Naruto." He looked at her. Then he stepped forward, took her face in his hands, both hands, very lightly, and pressed his forehead to hers for a count of 3. "You sleep too," he said quietly. 3 hours minimum. That's an order from your operational partner, not your subordinate. The day will not be won by either of us if either of us is empty when it starts." She closed her eyes. She breathed him in for a moment. Then she said against his forehead, "Yes, sir. Don't call me sir. I am pulling rank back. You said partner. Partners can call each other sir. That is the opposite of the agreement." "Make me stop, brat." He laughed, low and tired and real, and let go of her, and stepped back, and was gone out the broken skylight in a flicker. She stood in the corridor for a long moment, alone, with 3 unconscious enemies of the village at her feet and a sleeping village above her head. And then she went and got 2 hours of sleep, because partners did what their partners asked. The 7th day went like this. A chunin clerk named Iman, the same Iman who had filed Tatsuo Hino's employment record 3 months earlier, and who therefore owed several specific favors to several specific people, delivered at 2 in the morning a single sealed scroll to a dead drop in a tea shop in the merchant quarter. He did not know who the drop served. He did not know what the scroll said. He had been told very precisely where to put it and when, and he had been paid in advance, and he had done the job. At 2:12 in the morning, the scroll was picked up by a man who did not look like Jiraiya of the Sannin, because Jiraiya of the Sannin had not looked like Jiraiya of the Sannin when entering Konoha in 3 years. The man took the scroll, walked 4 blocks, sat down at a different tea shop, opened the scroll, read the single line of text on it, and went absolutely still for the count of 9. The line said, "Your godson has been running you for 2 years and would like to meet. He'll find you. Don't be angry. The fate of the village is on the 7th day. S." Georgia read it again. He folded the scroll. He sat back in his chair. After a moment, he began to laugh. He laughed for a long time. He laughed until the woman who ran the tea shop came over very politely to ask if he was all right. He laughed until she went away again. He laughed until his ribs hurt, and then he stopped laughing, and he wiped his eyes, and he sat for a while looking out the window at the empty street with an expression on his face that nobody had ever seen on it before. The expression of a man who had just discovered, after 13 years of failing to do the right thing, that the right thing had been doing itself without him. At 2:40, a 13-year-old boy in clerk's clothes sat down at the table opposite him. Georgia looked at him. The boy looked back. After a long moment, Georgia said very softly, "Hello, kid. Hello, godfather. You've grown. I've had to. I owe you an apology I do not know how to make." "You and the Hawkage can compare notes," Naruto said, and the smile he gave Georgia was the smile of a man who had decided, somewhere in the past 3 years, to forgive people in advance of their apologies, because forgiveness was useful and grudges were heavy. "Sit. Listen. We have 2 days, and I have a great deal to tell you, and the most important thing I have to tell you is that the old man is going to live through this week, and you are going to help me make him live." Georgia looked at him. Georgia looked at his godson, at the blue eyes, at the whisker marks, at the steady set of the small shoulders, at the way the boy held his hands folded on the table the way Kushina had once held hers, the way Minato had once held his, and the great white-haired toad sage who had spent 13 years not coming to see his godson because he had been afraid of what he would find sat across the table from what he had been afraid of finding, and did not find it. He found something else. "All right, kid," Georgia said quietly. "Tell me," Naruto told him. The invasion came on the 9th day. It came at the 3rd bell of the final exam round in the arena above the village, with 60,000 civilians in the stands and the council in the high box and the Kazekage, who was not the Kazekage, in his seat beside the Sandaime. It came with a flash of light and a wall of sound, and the 4-corner barrier going up around the roof of the arena exactly as Naruto had said it would, with the Sandaime Hawkage and Orochimaru of the Sannin sealed inside it. It came with a sound army, flooding the 7 breach points in the village wards, all 7 of which had been quietly repaired in the last 48 hours by Naruto Uzumaki personally, working under 3 different henges and a great deal of caffeine. It came with the sound 4 already in position, each of them within 10 meters of where their location tag had said they would be, each of them moving on a target Naruto had predicted to within a margin of 3 meters and 40 seconds. It came, in short, into a trap. The barrier on the roof of the arena went up. 3 seconds later, it came down. It came down because 4 shadow clones Naruto had spent 6 hours preparing the night before, each one carrying a complete Uzumaki barrier-piercing seal, each one anchored with a fragment of Kurama's chakra, appeared at the 4 corners of the barrier at exactly the same instant, placed their palms against the chakra walls, and pushed. The barrier did not so much break as unfold. It came apart along its seams, the way a folded piece of paper comes apart when you pull on opposite corners, and it was gone before Orochimaru's sound 4 corner guards had finished registering that anything was happening to it. The sound 4 corner guards then registered that they were no longer on the roof of the arena. They had been replaced by a substitution Naruto had set up 4 hours earlier, with markers placed in their bedrolls the previous night, with 4 very confused unconscious sand genin who had been knocked out by a tea house owner Naruto had been paying for 2 months. The sound 4 found themselves in a sealed underground chamber beneath the T&I building, in individual rooms, with full chakra suppression seals active, with Anko Mitarashi smiling at each of them through a one-way observation window in a way that suggested she had been looking forward to this for a very long time. That was the corner guards handled. On the roof of the arena, the barrier collapsed inward and Orochimaru of the Sannin found himself, for the first time since entering the village, in a fight he had not designed. The Sandaime did not fight him. The Sandaime stepped back, calmly, almost gently, and Jiraiya of the Sannin landed on the roof beside him with his hands already moving and his eyes already gold with sage chakra. And Naruto Uzumaki, himself, blond and blue-eyed and undisguised in his proctor blacks, landed on Jiraiya's other side. And Anko Mitarashi came down a second behind him with her coat off her shoulders and her killing intent in the air like the smell of a storm. Orochimaru looked at the four of them. He looked at the boy. He looked particularly at the boy. He recognized him. Naruto could see the moment of recognition, the moment Orochimaru put together the boy he had failed to bite in the forest and the boy he had been told was dead, and the seal craft on Anko Mitarashi's collarbone that he had felt unmaking itself from across the continent 6 weeks ago and had not understood until now. Orochimaru's mouth fell slightly open. For exactly 1 second, the snake Sannin looked, in his stolen body, like a man who had walked into a room expecting to give a lecture and found that the audience had been waiting to ask him questions. Then he smiled. It was a thin, slow, considering smile, and it had no humor in it at all. "Well," he said softly, "this is going to be much more interesting than I planned." Below them, in the village, the sound of fighting was beginning to rise. The Sound Army hitting the breach points and finding the breach points held. The Konoha Shinobi Naruto had positioned springing the second layer of the trap. The night-long battle through the streets and the underground that he and Anko had spent 2 months preparing for beginning finally to happen. Above them, on the roof, Naruto Uzumaki cracked his knuckles and grinned at the man who had marked the woman beside him. "Yeah," he said. "It's gonna be." Chapter 5. The mark unmade Orochimaru moved first. He had to. Naruto had counted on it. The man was a planner, and his plan had just been disassembled in front of him by a 13-year-old, and the only piece of leverage he had left in the moment was the speed with which he could break the silence. So he broke it. His arm came forward in a motion that was not quite a punch and not quite a strike, and the Kusanagi blade slid out of his throat like a tongue with a will of its own, and the tip of it crossed the distance to Naruto's heart in the space of 1 breath. Jiraiya was already moving. Anko was already moving. Naruto was not moving because Naruto was, very deliberately, standing exactly where he had decided to stand. He had run this scenario in his head 200 times. He had run it in his head with Kurama, who had run it with him. He knew, to within a hand's breadth, the angle the Kusanagi would come in at, and he knew the precise sequence of seals he would use to redirect it, and he had been waiting 9 days to use them. The tip of the blade reached his chest. The tip of the blade bent. It did not bend physically. The metal did not deform. The chakra projection that carried it deformed. Naruto's left hand was at hip height with 3 fingers folded and 1 extended, and the seal string he had drawn in the air with that fingertip, invisible to anyone watching, fast enough that even Jiraiya did not see it form, caught the Kusanagi's edge and slid it sideways by exactly 4 centimeters, which was the precise distance required to take it from his sternum to the empty air past his ribs. He stepped inside the blade. He put his palm flat against Orochimaru's chest. He said very quietly, "Hi!" The seal he discharged through his palm was not designed to kill. It was designed, specifically, to introduce the body Orochimaru was currently occupying to a piece of Uzumaki chakra disruption work that Naruto had spent 6 months building in private. The seal was not subtle. It did not need to be. It went into Orochimaru's host body like a hot wire into wax, and Orochimaru, feeling it in real time, recognizing the texture of it, understanding within a quarter second what had just happened, abandoned the body. The host he had been wearing collapsed sideways off the Kusanagi like a marionette, with the strings cut. A pale, thin, white shape extruded itself from the dead man's open mouth, Orochimaru's real form, the snakeskin he had built for himself out of decades of hijacked vessels, long and impossibly fast, and it lashed sideways across the roof toward the open air, intending to be on the other side of the arena and 3 rooftops away before any of them could close the distance. Jiraiya caught it. He caught it with a chakra rope he had been spinning in his offhand since the barrier came down, and the sage chakra in his palms turned the rope into something Orochimaru could not slip, and the great white snake thing that had been the Sannin's escape vehicle thrashed once very hard and was hauled bodily back onto the roof of the arena. Orochimaru reformed. It cost him. Naruto could see it costing him. The form that pulled itself back together standing on the tiles was thinner than the host had been, and paler, and the yellow eyes were paler too, and his hair hung damp at his temples. The reconstitution had eaten reserves he had not planned to spend. He had been 40 seconds into a campaign, and he had already burned a body, and he could see, in the way the four of them stood on the roof, that the campaign was not going to give him another one. "Naruto-kun," he said softly, "Orochimaru-san, you have been very busy." "I would like very much to know," Orochimaru said, almost conversationally, "how a boy of 13 came to be in possession of half the lost art of Uzushiagakure." "I read a lot. I see." The snake, Sannin, looked at Jiraiya. He looked at the Sandaime, who had stepped back behind Jiraiya's shoulder and was watching the whole thing with the perfect stillness of a man who had been told to stay out of the fight and was trying very hard, against every instinct of 50 years, to honor the instruction. He looked finally and longest at Anko. His face changed. It was a small change, and it was not kind. The mouth tightened. The yellow eyes narrowed. For the first time since the barrier had come down, Naruto saw on Orochimaru's face something that was not a calculation. It was personal. It was the small, ugly twitch of a man being shown a possession that had been taken from him. "Anko-chan, don't," she said. "You let him put his hands on you." "He put his hands on what was mine, Orochimaru, not yours, mine. You stole it for 10 years. He gave it back." "Oh, sweet thing," Orochimaru murmured, and the pity in his voice was so well constructed that Naruto, who knew better, almost felt it. "You don't understand what he's done. You don't understand what he's taken from you. You will in time. You will come back to me, and you will beg me to put it back, and I will, because I am generous to my children, and you will be whole again." Anko laughed. She laughed the way she had laughed in the forest the first time, 3 months ago, that ugly bark of a laugh that meant she was about to do something violent, and she stepped forward to Naruto's shoulder and she said, "Sensei!" "Yes, Anko-chan, look at me." He looked at her. "I have not had a headache in 9 weeks, she said quietly. "I have not had the dreams in 9 weeks. I have not had your voice in the back of my head asking me to do things I did not want to do in 9 weeks. I am not your child. I was never your child. You put a leash on a 12-year-old and you called it apprenticeship, and you have lived in my skin for 10 years, and the boy on my left took you out of me in 20 minutes with an ink brush. So when you tell me, Sensei, that you are going to put it back, I want you to understand, before this conversation goes any further, that the only thing that is going back into me from you tonight is your blood, and only the amount I can fit on my kunai." She drew her kunai. It made a small, clean sound. Orochimaru looked at her for a long, long moment. Then he sighed. "Yes," he said softly, "I had hoped not to do this, but you understand." He bit his thumb. Naruto felt the shape of what came next before it came. He had been bracing for it for 9 days. 2 coffins, rising up out of the roof tiles in a slow grind of summoned earth, taller than men, the wood old and gray, and inscribed with seals that Naruto recognized at a depth that turned his stomach. Edo Tensei. The forbidden art that Tabarama Senju had created and sealed away, because he had understood, even as he made it, that what he had made was a kind of slavery worse than death. The coffin on the left bore the kanji for first. The coffin on the right bore the kanji for second. Orochimaru smiled thinly. He had recovered some of his composure now. He had been counting on this moment for months, and even now, with the rest of his plan in ruins, he had this, 2 of the most legendary shinobi who had ever lived, drawn back into the world to serve him. Weapons he had been promised could not be defeated by anything currently breathing in the land of fire. "Now, Naruto-kun," he said, "I am very interested to see what you do about." The coffins finished rising. The seals on their faces flared. And then on both coffins at once, another seal flared, a small spiral seal, no bigger than a child's hand, that had been drawn onto the inside of each coffin's lid in fresh ink sometime in the last 12 hours. The coffins did not open. The coffins crumbled. They came apart in a fine gray dust that fell inward into the roof tiles, the wood of them dissolving from the inside out, and what spilled out of them was not the first and the second hawkage. What spilled out of them was nothing at all. They were empty. They had been empty before they rose. The reanimation array had reached for the corpses it was bound to and had found, in the place where the corpses should have been, a small spiral seal drawn by an Uzumaki, and the array had unmade itself rather than violate the older claim of blood. Orochimaru's smile faltered. It faltered slowly, the way a candle goes out when someone walks past it. He stared at the dust on the tiles. He stared then at Naruto. "You went into the graves." "Last night," Naruto said quietly. "I spent 6 hours with each of them. They have been moved. They are safe. They are sealed under my mother's family's wards in a place you cannot find, and they will be returned to consecrated ground when this is over. I am sorry, Hokage-sama," he added, glancing back briefly at Hiruzen, "that I did not tell you about that piece in advance. I needed it to be a surprise to him, and the only way to make sure it was a surprise was to make sure nobody knew." Hiruzen, behind Jiraiya, said quietly, "I forgive you the surprise, Naruto-kun." "Thank you, Jiji." Orochimaru on the other side of the roof made a sound that was almost a laugh and not quite a scream. "You," he said, "you have unmade my entire afternoon. I have. You have unmade 10 years of my work. I have. You have unmade my Anko. She was never yours, Orochimaru." The snake Sannin looked at him for a long, long moment. Then he moved. He moved at a speed Naruto had been preparing for and had not, in his heart, been entirely sure he could match. The Kusanagi came up out of the body on the tiles, the blade Naruto had bent aside 30 seconds ago, animating itself off the dead host as if it had a will of its own, which in some technical sense it did, and Orochimaru's hands flickered through seals faster than the eye could read them, and the rooftop tile cracked under his feet as he launched. He did not come at Naruto. He came at Anko. Naruto had braced for this too. He was between them before Orochimaru's foot left the tile. He did not move at 2/3 speed. He did not move at any speed he had ever shown anybody but Kurama. He moved at the speed he had been hiding for 2 years, the speed that had been the whole point of the speedwork he had cracked off the fourth's notes, and his palm met Orochimaru's chest in the space between 2 heartbeats. He had time to register the look in Orochimaru's eyes, surprise, finally, real and clean and undisguised, and then he was driving the second seal of the evening through the Sannin's sternum. This one was not designed to be subtle either. It was designed to do to Orochimaru what Orochimaru had spent 40 years doing to other people, which was to introduce his chakra system to a process it had not consented to. Specifically, it was designed to lock him, not seal him away, not bind him into a host. Lock him into the body he was currently wearing, with no possibility of jumping out, no possibility of summoning a new vessel, no possibility of using the long, pale snake form to slither away to safety. The technique was a marriage of 2 pieces of Uzumaki work. One of them adapted from a body seal Kushina Uzumaki had developed during the 3rd Shinobi War, and the other of them adapted from something Naruto had built himself, and it had taken him 14 months to make them play together. It worked. He felt it bind. He felt the click of it locking against the inside of Orochimaru's chakra coils. He felt Orochimaru's whole body convulse once hard as the seal bind seated itself, and he stepped back out of the strike range before the Kusanagi could come around to take his arm off, and he watched Orochimaru try to abandon the body and fail. The snake Sannin staggered. He looked down at his chest. He looked up at Naruto. For the second time in 2 minutes, his face did something it almost never did, which was register a real emotion that he had not chosen. This time it was fear. "What did you do? I locked you in." "What?" "You are no longer able to jump bodies, Orochimaru-san. You are no longer able to use your snake form to escape. You are no longer able to summon another vessel. You are in the body you are wearing, and you are going to die in the body you are wearing unless we decide otherwise, which we have not decided yet. We are still discussing it." Orochimaru looked at him. The expression on his face shifted then in a way Naruto would remember for the rest of his life. It went from fear to disbelief to a thin, cold, dawning understanding, the understanding of a man who had spent 40 years collecting tools to never be in this position, and who had just discovered all at once that none of the tools were in his hands anymore. "You," he whispered. Naruto did not answer. He did not need to. Behind him, Anko stepped forward, and Jiraiya stepped forward, and the Sandaime stepped forward, and the four of them faced Orochimaru on the broken tile of the arena roof. And the snake Sannin, locked in, cornered with no exit, drew himself up to his full height and lifted the Kusanagi and made one last, desperate calculation. He smiled. It was an ugly smile. "If I am to die today," he said softly, "then I am going to be very particular about who I take with me." He came for Anko. That was his calculation. Not Naruto. Naruto had locked him, and Naruto had unmade his plan, and Naruto was the engine of the trap, but Anko was the hurt. Anko was the thing he wanted to break before he went, the personal injury, the apprentice who had walked out from under his hand. If he was going to die on this roof, he was going to die having put his sword through the only piece of his work that had ever truly defied him. Anko did not move backward. Anko moved forward. She moved forward into the Kusanagi with her own kunai held low and her mouth set in a thin, hard line. And she did not flinch as the blade came at her face. And she did not need to flinch, because Naruto had already stepped in beside her, and Jiraiya had already stepped in beside him, and the three of them met Orochimaru's last attack as a single unit and broke it. Naruto's left hand caught the flat of the Kusanagi. Jiraiya's chakra rope wrapped Orochimaru's wrist. Anko's kunai went, not into the Sannin's throat. She had wanted that for 10 years, and she had decided in the past 5 seconds that she did not, in fact, want it badly enough to be the one who delivered it, but into the meat of his shoulder, hard enough to anchor him, deep enough to make him drop the sword. The Kusanagi clattered onto the tiles. Orochimaru hung between them, pinned by the rope at the wrist and the kunai at the shoulder, the seal locked into his chest, his yellow eyes very wide. For a long, long moment, nobody on the roof said anything. Then Hiruzen Sarutobi walked forward between his 2 former students and stopped in front of his third one. "Orochimaru," he said quietly. The snake Sannin looked at him. The 2 old men who had been boys together once on these same streets looked at each other across 40 years of history, and the Sandaime's face was very, very tired. "I should have done this when you were 9 years old," Hiruzen said. "I saw what you were becoming. I saw it before anyone else, and I told myself you could be turned, and I did not turn you, and I let you go, and a great many people died because I could not bring myself to put down something I had once loved. I am sorry, my student. I am sorry to you, and I am sorry to them. This will not happen again." He laid his palm flat against Orochimaru's forehead. He spoke very softly, a single word. Orochimaru of the Sannin closed his eyes. It was quick. It was quieter than he deserved. Hiruzen's chakrawork was old and elegant, and it stopped the heart in the locked body without theatrics, and the long pale form sagged forward against Jiraiya's rope, and that was all. Jiraiya let the rope go. The body slumped onto the tiles next to its sword. Anko, beside Naruto, let out a long, slow breath that she had been holding for 10 years. She did not speak. Naruto did not speak either. He took her hand. She let him. It would have been a clean ending if the world were a clean place. The world was not a clean place. Naruto had known, since 2 days ago, what Danzo would do the moment the invasion broke. He had built a plan for it. He had not told the Sandaime about the plan, because the plan involved letting Danzo believe he had succeeded for approximately 40 minutes, and the Sandaime would not have agreed to that, and Naruto had decided that the Sandaime's agreement was less important than the result. This was a thing he would have to apologize for later. The marker seal he had placed on Danzo Shimura 6 weeks ago, woven into the cloth of the man's coat by a tailor Naruto had been paying since the spring, pulsed against the inside of his ribcage the moment the seal bind on Orochimaru clicked into place. Danzo had been watching. Danzo had felt the moment of Orochimaru's defeat through whatever channel Danzo was using to monitor the rooftop, and Danzo was, exactly as predicted, moving. He was moving toward the central administrative tower. He was moving toward the council chamber. He was moving, specifically, toward the emergency succession protocols, which under village law allowed for a sitting council elder to assume provisional Hokage powers in the event that the Hokage was incapacitated and unreachable, on the signature of a quorum of 2 other elders. The Hokage was, at this moment, supposedly trapped on a sealed arena roof in active combat with a Sannin. Hiruzen was, in the official record being generated by Danzo's clerks right now, both incapacitated and unreachable. Koharu and Hamura, the 2 other elders, were in the council chamber. The signatures would be on the document within 4 minutes. Naruto leaned over very quietly and said into Anko's ear, "I have to go." She turned her head. "Naruto, Danzo, he's moving on the council chamber. He's going to claim emergency succession. I have to be there before the signatures." "How long do you have?" 4 minutes, maybe 3. "Go, I'll handle this." "Anko, go, brat. Gigi is fine. Jirya is fine. The Sound 4 are in the basement. The invasion is being handled by your people. Go take Danzo apart." He looked at her for a half-second. He kissed her once on the cheekbone very fast, and then he was off the arena roof in a yellow flash, and Anko Mitarashi stood on the broken tiles with Jirya of the Sannin on her left and the Sandame Hokage on her right and the body of her old master at her feet, and she let out a small, slightly hysterical laugh. "Was that," Jirya said carefully, "the Hiraishin?" "Yes, the kid knows the Hiraishin." "Yes, of course he does." "Yeah," Anko said. "Welcome to dating Naruto Uzumaki, Jirya-sama. The bar resets every 15 minutes. "Dating?" Jirya squawked. The Sandame very quietly on her other side said, "I will fill you in over tea, Jirya, in about an hour. There is a great deal to discuss." Anko did not stay to hear it. She had her own work. The Sound Army was still in the village, the breach points were still under pressure, and her 4 Chunin in the basement were still managing the largest covert operation she had ever run. She set her jaw, dropped off the roof, and went to do her job. 3 minutes and 12 seconds after Naruto left the arena roof, the door to the central council chamber on the 7th floor of the administrative tower opened, and a 13-year-old boy in Proctor Blacks walked in. There were 6 people in the room. Danzo Shimura was at the head of the council table, standing, with one hand on the back of the chair and the other inside the front of his robes. There were 2 scrolls open in front of him on the wood. There was a brush already inked. Koharu was seated to his right. Hamura was seated to his left. 2 root agents were behind him, masked, motionless. A clerk Naruto recognized, one of Danzo's, a man named Yamamoto, stood at the side wall with a sealing pen in his hand, ready to witness. 6 people, 3 of whom Naruto needed to walk out of this room, 3 of whom he did not. The door clicked shut behind him. Danzo looked up. His single visible eye registered Naruto. It registered Naruto with an absence of surprise that was, in itself, the most useful piece of information Naruto had collected all afternoon. Danzo had been expecting him, not at this moment perhaps, and not in this room, but in general, in principle, in the back of his head. The boy had been a piece on Danzo's board for 10 years, and Danzo had always known the boy might step off the board on his own. "Naruto-kun," Danzo said evenly. "You are not where you are supposed to be." "I am exactly where I am supposed to be." "The arena is handled. Orochimaru is dead. The invasion is being dismantled by personnel I positioned for the purpose. The Hokage is alive, intact, and in conversation with Jirya-sama on a rooftop 200 meters from here. There is no emergency. There is no succession. Please put the brush down, Danzo-sama, and we will discuss the rest of the afternoon like the civilized men we both are." Koharu beside Danzo made a small, sharp noise. Hamura on the other side half rose from his seat. "Naruto-kun, this is highly irregular. Sit down, Hamura-san." He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. The voice that came out of him was not the voice of a 13-year-old. And Hamura, who had known Naruto since Naruto was a swaddled infant in the Sandame's arms, and who had taken the boy's measure many times over the years and decided each time that there was nothing to fear, sat down. Danzo did not put the brush down. "You are a child," Danzo said quietly, "and you are out of your depth, and you are interfering in a council matter." "I am Uzumaki," Naruto said, "and I am exactly in my depth, and I am preventing a coup." "There is no coup. There are 2 emergency succession scrolls on the table in front of you, drafted in your handwriting, requiring 2 elder signatures and a witness, and the Hokage has been on the arena roof for less than 12 minutes. There is a coup." "You will not speak to me." "Yamamoto, The clerk at the wall flinched. He had not expected to be addressed. Yamamoto-san, you have been working in this tower for 11 years. You filed Tatsuo Hino's employment record 3 months ago at the request of a Chunin clerk named Eamon. You did not know at the time that I was Tatsuo. You know now. I am telling you in front of these witnesses that you have one chance to walk out of this room as a man who made a paperwork error and not as a participant in a treason. Set the sealing pen down on the table. Step away from the wall. Sit at the secretary's chair by the door. Do nothing else. Do you understand me? Yamamoto stared at him. He stared at him for a count of 3. Then he set the sealing pen down on the table, very gently, walked to the secretary's chair by the door, and sat in it with his hands on his knees and his eyes on the floor. Danzo's single eye did not move from Naruto's face. You have been operating in this village without sanction. I have been operating in this village without yours. Hiruzen does not have the stomach for what comes next. Hiruzen, Naruto said quietly, has more stomach than you have given him credit for, Danzo-sama, and I would invite you to consider that very carefully before you continue speaking. The last man who underestimated the Sandaime in this tower is currently dead on an arena roof. You are next on the list, if you would like to be. The 2 root agents behind Danzo shifted by perhaps a centimeter each, the small involuntary motion of men preparing to move. Naruto did not look at them. He did not need to. The seal tags on the inside of their masks, drawn there by their tailor, the same tailor who had marked Danzo's coat, the same tailor Naruto had been paying since the spring, pulsed once very quietly, and the 2 root agents went down where they stood. Unconscious, not dead. He had been very specific with the tailor about this. The men were tools, the same way Anko had been a tool. They were unmade, the same way Anko had been unmade. They would wake up tomorrow in a holding cell with no compulsion on them for the first time in their adult lives, and they would be given the choice that had never been offered to them. And Naruto would deal with what they chose then. The 2 root agents hit the carpet. Koharu let out a breath. Hamura made the smallest possible sound. Danzo did not move. His hand was still inside his robes. Naruto knew what was inside his robes. He had known what was inside Danzo's robes for 2 years. He had read about it in a root file he was not supposed to have access to and had spent a week verifying it through Jiraiya's network. Danzo's right arm under the wrappings was not Danzo's right arm. It carried 10 transplanted Sharingan eyes from 10 dead Uchiha, and it carried a cell of the first Hokage flesh that allowed those eyes to be used at sustained chakra cost. And one of those eyes, a specific one, set into the shoulder hidden by the wrappings, carried a jutsu Danzo had been refining for 50 years called Izanagi, which allowed its user to rewrite a single causal event in his immediate future, once per eye, at the cost of the eye. Danzo had 10 Izanagi uses available to him. 10 chances to undo whatever happened next. 10 chances to make this moment into a different moment and walk out of it the winner. Naruto had known about all of this for 2 years. He had built accordingly a counter. Danzo-sama, boy, you are going to take your hand out of your robes very slowly, and you are going to set it palm flat on the table, and you are going to leave it there. If you reach for Izanagi, the eyes will not activate. I have sealed your shoulder. The single visible eye went very slightly wider. You have what? Sealed your shoulder. The marker tag on your coat is not just a tracker, Danzo-sama. The tailor was instructed to lay a base array under the inside lining at the shoulder seam, keyed to my chakra. I activated it the moment I crossed the threshold of this room. The Sharingan eyes in your arm are currently inert. You can attempt to use Izanagi if you like. It will not function. You will only burn the eyes and lose the option permanently. Danzo did not move. He did not move for a long, long time. Then, very slowly, he took his hand out of his robes. He set it palm flat on the table. He looked at Naruto for a long moment, and the visible eye held an expression that Naruto recognized, not quite respect, not quite hatred, but something cleaner and rarer than either, the look of a man examining a tool that had turned in his hand and finding the turn well made. "How long?" Danzo said quietly. 2 years. You are 13. I am Uzumaki. Yes, Danzo's mouth twitched in something that was almost, but not quite, a smile. Yes, so you are. Well played, Uzumaki-kun, well played. Tell me what now? Now, Naruto said, you stand up slowly and you walk to the wall and you sit on the floor with your hands flat on your knees and you wait. The Sandame will be here in approximately 7 minutes to take your statement personally. Until then, you will be silent. Koharu-san, Hamura-san, both of you will remain seated. Yamamoto-san will remain in the secretary's chair. The two on the floor will remain on the floor. Nobody in this room will speak again until the Hokage arrives. Are we clear? Nobody answered. Nobody needed to. Danzo Shimura stood up, slowly walked to the wall, sat down on the floor with his hands flat on his knees and waited. The room was very, very quiet. Outside in the village below, the sound of fighting was beginning to die. The 7 breach points were holding. The Sound Army was breaking against them. Anko Mitarashi was somewhere in the middle of it doing her job. The Sandame was on his way down from the arena roof, alive and intact and on his feet, the way Naruto had promised he would be. In the council chamber, a 13-year-old boy in Proctor Black stood by the door with his hands at his sides, and he watched 5 people sit very still, and he did not move, and he did not speak, and he did not let any of them out of his sight, and he waited for his Hokage to come. After about 4 minutes, Kurama spoke quietly behind his eyes. Kit. Yes, that was very well done. Thank you, Kurama. Don't get a big head about it. I won't. You're going too, I might. She'll keep you honest, the snake girl. I know. Good. The fox went quiet. The door at the far end of the corridor opened, and Naruto heard footsteps coming, Hiruzen's footsteps and Jiraiya's behind him, and a third pair that he recognized after a moment as Anko's. Even though she had said she would handle the village, she had handed it off to her Chunin, evidently the moment the breach point stabilized, because she had decided that there was a place she needed to be more, and that place was here. He smiled very slightly, looking at the door. The footsteps came closer. Behind him, in the council chamber, Danzo Shimura sat against the wall with his hands flat on his knees and watched the boy at the door and saw, for the first time in his long, careful, treacherous life, what an Uzumaki looked like when he had decided to stop hiding. He did not look away. He could not. The door opened. The Sandame walked in.